What would you do if you opened your mailbox and found a hefty fine for something you didn't even do? Daniel Reynolds was a quiet man by nature. As a high school history teacher, he valued peace after long days spent in noisy classrooms. And with restless teenagers, his evenings usually ended with a cup of tea, a book, and the soft hum of his record player. That Friday evening, however, his usual calm was shattered the moment he checked his mailbox. Among the grocery flyers and utility bills was a stark white envelope with the HOA's emblem. He frowned, already bracing himself for some petty complaint about lawn care or recycling bins. But when he tore it open, his jaw nearly hit the ground. Notice of violation. Excessive noise disturbance. Fine, $500. Daniel's brow furrowed. Noise disturbance. He hadn't even been home. He'd just returned from his nephew's graduation trip to towns over. For 3 nights, his house had stood completely empty, lights off, doors locked. How could anyone accuse him of blasting loud music or throwing parties? Then his eyes caught the signature at the bottom, Karen Holloway, HOA President. Karen. The name alone made Daniel's stomach twist. She was notorious in the neighborhood for her meddling, her sharp tongue, and her obsession with enforcing rules she often bent for herself. Still, this was beyond anything Daniel had expected. A $500 fine for something he couldn't possibly have done. He clenched the paper in his hand. This wasn't a mistake. This was a challenge. The moment he knocked on her door, Daniel knew this wasn't going to be a civil conversation. The next morning, Daniel marched across the cul-de-sac to Karen's brick-faced house. Her flower beds were perfectly trimmed, her driveway spotless, a portrait of control. He knocked firmly, gripping the fine letter in his hand. Karen opened the door, wearing a smug smile, as if she had been expecting him. "Ah, Mr. Reynolds," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "Come to settle, you're fine." Daniel held the paper out. "Actually, I came to clear this up. I wasn't even home when this supposed noise happened." Karen raised an eyebrow, arms crossing. "That's convenient. But I had several complaints from your neighbors. Loud music, people shouting, and cars parked outside your house until midnight. Don't try to weasel out of it." Daniel blinked, incredulous. "That's impossible. I was out of town for my nephew's graduation. I have receipts, tickets, everything." But Karen waved him off like an annoying fly. "Save your excuses. You're responsible for your property, whether you're home or not. Maybe your guests didn't tell you they were hosting a party there." "My house was empty, Karen," Daniel said, his voice firm now. "Completely empty, and you know it." Her smile faltered for just a split second before she recovered. "If you want to contest it, take it up with the board. But I wouldn't recommend wasting your time." And with that, she shut the door in his face. Daniel stood there, staring at the closed door, heat rising in his chest. It was clear Karen wasn't just mistaken. She was deliberately targeting him. Sometimes, the truth doesn't come from authority, it comes from whispers across the fence. Later that day, Daniel went to check in with his closest neighbors, the Thompsons. He found Mr. Thompson trimming hedges while his wife watered flowers. "Noise disturbance," Mr. Thompson repeated when Daniel explained the fine. "That's nonsense. Your house was dark all night. We'd have noticed." Mrs. Thompson chimed in, frowning. "But Karen's place, now that was another story. She had half a dozen cars lined up on the street, people laughing until well past midnight. I had to shut my windows just to sleep." Daniel's eyebrows shot up. "Karen." They both nodded. Mr. Thompson lowered his voice. "She's been pulling this stunt on people for months, accusing them of things she's guilty of. Most folks just pay the fines to avoid the hassle. But we know you, Daniel, you should fight this." Daniel thanked them, their words fueling his determination. If Karen thought he'd roll over like the others, she was wrong. He was a teacher, patient, methodical, and trained to deal with liars. And now, she'd given him a reason to fight back. If Karen wanted a fight, Daniel was ready to turn his quiet house into the loudest evidence of her lies. That evening, Daniel went through his home security system. He had installed cameras after a package theft last year, and thankfully, they recorded continuously. He scrolled through the footage from the night in question. His house was exactly as he'd left it, dark, silent, untouched. Across the street, however, Karen's porch lights glowed bright. He could clearly hear laughter and music spilling out as cars came and went until nearly 1 a.m. Daniel leaned back, relief washing over him. This was ironclad proof. He also gathered his hotel receipts, credit card charges from the out-of-town diner, and even selfies with his nephew from the graduation. There was no doubt he wasn't home, and the real culprit was Karen. But instead of confronting her again, he decided on a different approach. He filed a police report, attaching the video evidence and his travel records. If Karen wanted to play dirty, he would let the law handle her lies. Karen thought she was untouchable until flashing lights pulled into the neighborhood. A few days later, Daniel was mowing his lawn when a police cruiser rolled into the cul-de-sac. The officer stepped out and approached him, asking about the complaint he'd filed. Daniel calmly explained everything, showing them the evidence again. One officer nodded. Looks solid to me. Mind if we go have a word with Ms. Holloway? Daniel shook his head. Be my guest. The entire neighborhood seemed to pause as the officers crossed the street. Curtains twitched, garage doors froze mid-closing. Wanted to see what would happen. Karen answered the door, her confident posture slipping when she spotted the uniforms. Officers, she said too sweetly, what seems to be the problem? We're here regarding a false noise complaint against Mr. Reynolds. One officer said, he has video evidence proving he wasn't home. We'd like to know where your reports came from. Karen's smile faltered. For the first time, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA had nothing to say. Karen stammered, her eyes darting between the officers and the watching neighbors. I had complaints from several residents, she insisted, but when asked to name them, her words caught in her throat. The officer pressed further. Can you provide those complaints in writing? Karen froze, lips parting but no sound coming out. She couldn't admit she'd fabricated them, not with the entire neighborhood watching. Finally, she muttered, I must have mixed up the addresses. The officer's expression hardened. Filing false complaints is a serious matter. Ma'am, consider this a formal warning. If it happens again, we'll escalate. Karen's face turned scarlet. She tried to regain composure, but it was too late. The neighbors had seen everything. Her reign of intimidation had cracked in a single afternoon. When the dust settles, the truth always has the loudest voice. The HOA board reviewed Daniel's appeal with the police report and security footage in hand. They had no choice but to drop the fine. In fact, several board members quietly admitted they were tired of Karen's overreach. Within weeks, a petition circulated to remove her as president. Signatures poured in from residents who had suffered under her arbitrary rules and fines. At the next board meeting, Karen was voted out, her voice drowned by the very people she once silenced. For Daniel, the victory wasn't just personal, it was communal. The neighborhood grew friendlier, freer, lighter. He could finally sip tea on his porch without the shadow of Karen looming over him. As for Karen, she avoided eye contact with anyone, hurrying inside whenever a neighbor passed. Her smug smile was gone, replaced by silence. And Daniel, he knew one thing for certain, a world full of false accusations, the truth was the loudest sound of all.